My name is Athena Morrison. I'm 32, an ER nurse practitioner in Connecticut. I left my 5-year-old daughter, Mia, at my mother-in-law's house for one night while I covered a double shift. When I picked her up the next morning, she pressed her mouth to my ear in the parking lot and whispered 7 words. "Mommy, Grandma said, don't tell you." I knelt down. I asked what she saw. Her answer made my hands go cold on the steering wheel. What I found in a kitchen drawer 72 hours later, and what is said at her 6th birthday party in front of 40 people, that's the story. The first person who knew the whole truth wasn't me. It was a 5-year-old who couldn't yet read the calendar she'd been hiding under. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories. This is where quiet women keep their composure, gather their proof, and let the truth speak louder than any raised voice. If a smiling family member has ever made you question your own instincts, this story is for you. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. I've worked the emergency room at Hartford Mercy for 10 years. Before that, 3 years in pediatric ICU. I trained myself young to keep my hands steady while my chest did whatever it wanted. That training is the reason I'm still here. And it's the reason this story has a folder at the end of it instead of a lawsuit I couldn't pay for. I live in a 2-story colonial on the quiet side of West Hartford with my husband Daniel and our daughter Mia. Daniel's a software engineer who works from home 3 days a week. We met when I was 26 and he was 29 in a coffee shop that doesn't exist anymore. He's the kindest man I know. He's also the most conflict-avoidant man I know. Those 2 facts will become relevant. Mia turned 5 last November. She's small for her age, observant, the kind of kid who watches a room for 40 seconds before she speaks. Her favorite person in the world is a worn-down stuffed rabbit named Beans. Beans goes with us to the dentist, to bed, to grocery stores. She doesn't lose Beans. I want you to remember that. She doesn't lose him. My mother died of pancreatic cancer when Mia was 18 months old. She raised me and my brother Jack alone after our father left, and she did it on 2 jobs and 3 hours of sleep. I learned what a mother is from a woman who was almost never in the same room as me, but whose handwriting was on every note in my lunchbox until the day she went into hospice. When my mother-in-law, Diane Wells, stepped into our lives after Mom died, she came in soft. She brought casseroles. She offered to babysit. She told me more than once that I was the daughter she never had. For the first 3 years of Mia's life, I let myself believe her. I leaned on her. I told my brother Jick I was lucky to have her. 6 months from now, that sentence would taste like ash in my mouth. I just didn't know yet that I'd already missed the first signal. It was small. It was a stuffed rabbit. Diane Wells lives 20 minutes from us in a 4-bedroom colonial on a cul-de-sac in West Hartford. The house is too big for one person. Daniel's father passed 7 years ago before I joined the family. Diane retired from teaching 2nd grade the same year, and she filled the empty rooms with grandchildren who hadn't been born yet. She's 64. She wears pastel cardigans and keeps her hair in a soft bob. She trims herself. Her kitchen always smells like cinnamon. In every Christmas photo, she's the one in the center, both arms full of Mia, mouth wide in a laugh the camera caught exactly the right second. To anyone who's met her once, she is the grandmother you wish you had. Her daughter, my sister-in-law Vivienne, lives 10 minutes from her. Vivienne is 38. She divorced 4 years ago, 3 rounds of IVF, no children. She started showing up at Diane's house whenever I dropped Mia off. At the time, I told myself it was sweet. I told myself she just loved her niece. I told myself a lot of things. There's a sentence Diane said to me when Mia was 2. We were standing at a Sunday brunch on her back patio. Mia was asleep in a portable playpen 10 ft away. Diane handed me a coffee. She looked at Mia, then at me, and she said, "She's safer here with me, always will be." I laughed. I said something like, "Oh, I'll keep that in mind when the sleep deprivation finishes me off." She laughed, too. I drank the coffee. I didn't write the sentence down. I should have. 3 years later, I'd remember the exact tone, not the casual joke I'd convinced myself. It was something steadier, something all red I'd cited. There was another moment around the same time. Diane accidentally kept Beans after a visit. I drove 25 minutes back to her house to get him because Mia wouldn't sleep without him. Diane laughed in the doorway. "Oh, did she leave him?" she said. "I'll be more careful." Beans was sitting on her kitchen counter. He was facing the window. I took him and I drove home. 18 months before the parking lot, I got promoted from staff nurse practitioner to senior practitioner with a night rotation premium. The money was real. The schedule was hard. I worked 3 12-hour overnights a week. Daniel and I made it work. We weren't drowning. We weren't even close to drowning. That's the thing nobody tells you about emergency room work. You can be exhausted and still be entirely on top of your own life. You can have circles under your eyes and a clean house and a 6-month meal plan and a daughter who calls you the best mommy in the world. Both things are allowed to be true at the same time. People who have never done shift work won't always believe that. People in my family by marriage didn't believe it. Deanne offered sweetly to take Mia on the nights Daniel had business travel 2 or 3 times a month. I said yes. I was grateful. Viven started happening to be there every time I picked Mia up. She'd be holding a glass of wine. She'd take a picture of me and my scrubs at the front door. 3 days later, it would show up in the family group chat. "Single mom life Ishard on you, sis." That was a real caption. I screenshotted it eventually. So did Diane. Daniel saw the post once. He laughed. He said, "Vivienne is so weird sometimes. That was all the friction it generated. I let it slide." So did he. Mia started saying things that didn't quite fit a 5-year-old's vocabulary. "Grandma says, 'You work too hard, Mommy.' Aunt Vivy says, 'You look tired all the time.' I chalked it up to a kid repeating adult words. I asked her once gently what she meant. She said, 'Grandma just worries about us.' I told her grandmas worry, that's their job. I made her grilled cheese. If I count the warning signs I missed, I get to 4. The brunch sentence, the rabbit on the counter, the caption, the borrowed sentences. There's a 5th one I didn't catch until later. It was a child's drawing on a refrigerator. I'll get to it. The night this story really begins, my coworker Sarah Lynn came down with a flu that turned out to be RSV. She called me Friday at 4 in the afternoon. She apologized. She said she was sorry. She begged. I told her not to be sorry. I told her to drink water. I covered her Friday overnight on top of my own Saturday morning shift. 16 hours back to back. Daniel was in Boston. Business trip home Saturday morning at 11 Standard. I called Diane at 4:15. She picked up on the first ring. She sounded delighted. She said, "Oh, sweetheart, anytime you know that, bring her over by 6. Her voice had a quality I didn't think about then, eagerness, not surprise, as if she had been waiting for the phone to ring. I drove Mia to her house at 6. The car in the driveway next to Diane's was Vivian's silver Lexus. I let myself feel a small irritation and a smaller relief. Vivian would help. Diane would have backup. Fine. Mia walked in with beans under one arm and her overnight bag under the other. Diane bent down and hugged her. She kissed the top of her head. She said, "Hi, my favorite person." I went to the kitchen to drop off Mia's water bottle and an inhaler she sometimes needs at night. Mia asked Diane for a cup of juice. Diane went to the cabinet. Mia, helpful and curious, opened the 3rd drawer from the left and started rummaging. Diane shut the drawer with her hip quickly. She laughed. "Sweetheart, juice cups are up here. Grandma's drawer is just for grown-up things." Mia took her hand and pulled her toward the cabinet. The drawer closed. The latch made a small metal sound. On the way out, I noticed a drawing taped to the fridge. Knew Mia's handwriting. My family stick figures of Diane, Vivienne, Daniel, Mia. Know me. Diane saw me looking. She smiled gently. Kids forget things sometimes when they draw. She's a child. I drove away at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. I didn't look back. I didn't yet know that Diane was already on the phone before my taillights left the curb. I worked 16 hours. I stitched a 5-year-old's chin at 2 in the morning. I told a father his son was going to be all right. I drank 3 coffees. I drove to Diane's house at 7:20 Saturday morning. Diane opened the door in her coral cardigan, smiling. She was an angel, she said. We had so much fun. Mia stood behind her with beans crushed against her chest. She wasn't looking at Diane. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the floor. I knelt down. "Hi, baby, ready to go home?" She nodded once. She held her arms out to me. I picked her up. She put her face in my neck and didn't say anything. I thanked Diane. Diane said, "Anytime. Truly, we loved every minute." Vivian's car was still in the driveway. Vivian herself was not in sight. I buckled Mia into her car seat. I shut the door. I walked around to the driver's side. Diane was waving from the porch. I waved back. I got in. I turned the key. I rolled down the window because Mia liked the air. I drove to the corner of the cul-de-sac and stopped at the stop sign. Mia from the back seat said, "Mommy." I said, "Yes, sweetheart." She said, "Mommy." Grandma said I should never tell you what I saw. I did not turn around. I did not pull through the stop sign. I put the car in park. I unbuckled my seat belt and I turned around in my seat so I could see her face. Her eyes were big. Beans was halfway in her mouth. I said very gently, "Sweetheart, what did you see?" Mia said, "Grandma was crying with Aunt Vivy at the kitchen table. They had a calendar with red X's on it." And Grandma said, "The X on my birthday is when I come live with her forever." It did not move. I did not breathe out. I said, "Tell me again, baby. Tell me what Grandma said." Mia said, "Grandma said it's our special secret." She said, "Mommy doesn't need to know everything. I want to tell you exactly what I did next. Because the people in your life who decide things about you in private, they're counting on you to fall apart in the moment you find out. They want the tears. They want the shouting. They want you to drive back to the house and pound in the door so they can call your husband and say, 'She's having an episode.'" I smiled at my daughter. I said, "Thank you for telling me that, sweetheart. You are so brave. I'm not mad at you. You are never in trouble for telling Mommy the truth." "Okay." She nodded. I said, "Want to stop and get a donut?" She nodded harder. I drove to the Dunkin' on Farmington Avenue. I bought her a strawberry sprinkled donut and a small chocolate milk. I bought myself a black coffee I didn't drink. I sat in the parking lot for 2 minutes and watched her eat the donut in the rearview mirror. Her face came back to her piece by piece in pink sugar. I drove us home. I unlocked the door. I put on Bluey. I gave her a pillow and a blanket on the couch. I kissed the top of her head and I said, "Mommy needs a quick minute in the bathroom. I'll be right back." I closed the bathroom door. I locked it. I sat on the edge of the bathtub. I let myself breathe out for 40 seconds. Then I picked up my phone and opened a new note. I named it Diane. I typed Saturday 7:42 a.m. parking lot of 14 Whitfield Lane. Mia, age 5, verbatim. Grandma said I should never tell you what I saw. Subject saw kitchen calendar with red X marks. Subject heard Diane and Vivian planning Mia to live with Grandma forever on Mia's birthday. Subject also heard special secret. Mommy doesn't need to know everything. I read the note twice. I added timestamps. I screenshotted it to a second phone. I dried my face with a hand towel. I had 2 days before Daniel came home. I needed 3. Saturday afternoon, Mia watched 4 episodes of Bluey. I made her grilled cheese cut into triangles. I let her have apple juice in a special cup with butterflies on it. I asked her casually between episodes. The kind of questions I ask kids in the ER when I want them to tell me where it hurts without flinching. "Hey, Mia Bug, when you saw the calendar at Grandma's, was it on the wall or somewhere else?" She said on the inside of the cabinet door, the 3rd drawer one. "Okay. Was Aunt Vivy there with Grandma?" She nodded. Aunt Vivy was crying too, but the happy crying like when she got new shoes. "Did Grandma say anything else about Mommy?" She paused. She put her thumb in her mouth, which she only does when she's trying to get a thought right. She said, "Grandma said Mommy works too much. Aunt Vivy said when I come live with Grandma, we can pick out my big girl bedroom." They said I'm Grandma's new daughter. I said, "Sweetheart, did Grandma show you any pictures?" She nodded. "A whole stack. Pictures of you at the hospital in the parking lot sleeping in your car." Grandma said, "Those are for the lawyer." I went still. I kept the smile on my face. I asked, "Did Grandma say the lawyer's name?" Mia said, "Aunt Cindy." I said, "Sweetheart, Grandma doesn't get to decide where you live. Mommy and Daddy do always, no matter what Grandma says. That is the only rule that matters." She nodded. She crawled into my lap. Beans came with her. I held her and let her finish her episode. The 3rd drawer, photographs, a lawyer named Cindy. I sat with my hand on my daughter's back. And I let those 3 facts arrange themselves in my head while Bluey's dad sang on the screen. After Mia fell asleep on the couch at 4 in the afternoon, I went out to the back porch. I closed the slider behind me. I called Daniel's cell. He picked up after 6 rings. He was in a steakhouse with 2 coworkers. I could hear silverware. He said, "Hey, babe, what's up?" I told him slowly. The whisper, the calendar, the photographs, the name Cindy. I gave him the full sentence Mia had said. I read it from the note on my phone so I'd get it exactly right. There was a pause. I could hear him asking the coworkers to give him a minute. Then he said, "Babe, come on, she's 5, kids make stuff up." I said, "She didn't make this up, Daniel." He said, "Mom adores her, she would never." I said, "Mia described an inside cabinet door, the 3rd drawer. She described pictures. She named your aunt." Another pause. He said, okay, I'll talk to Mom when I get home tomorrow. Please don't do anything until then. Don't blow this up. I let his sentence sit in the air for 2 seconds. I said, "Drive carefully tomorrow." I hung up. I stood on the back porch and I watched a chickadee land on the railing and fly off again. I thought about my mother. I thought about how she would have said, "When a man asks you not to blow something up, what he means is don't ask him to deal with it." I did not call my brother yet. Jack would mean a lawyer. A lawyer would mean Daniel had to make a choice he wasn't ready to make. I wanted to give him one chance. I went back inside. Mia was still asleep on the couch. Beans was on the floor. I picked Beans up. I put him under her arm. I sat down in the armchair across from her and I waited for the sun to go down. I called Diane Sunday morning at 10:00. I made coffee first. I drank half of it. I had Mia at the kitchen counter with a coloring book and a pack of markers. I wanted background noise that wasn't TV. I wanted Diane to hear a 5-year-old in the room. Diane picked up on the 2nd ring. "Athena, honey, how are you?" I said, "Hi, Diane, I wanted to ask you something Mia mentioned last night." "Of course," I said. "She mentioned a calendar at your house with red X's on it." There was a small silence, maybe half a second. Diane laughed warmly. "Oh, sweetheart, that's just my old retirement countdown. Silly grandma." I said Mia said the X on her birthday means she comes to live with you forever. A longer silence, maybe a full second. Diane said she has such a vivid imagination. You know how kids that age are. I was probably just talking to Vivian about her birthday party and she heard half of it. I said she also mentioned a stack of photographs of me from the hospital, from the parking lot. She said you told her they were for the lawyer. Diane said, "Athena, I don't know where this is coming from. She's a child." I said, "I'm sure you're right. Have a good Sunday, Diane." I hung up. I sat at the kitchen counter and I watched my daughter color a dinosaur purple. Diane had not asked a single question. She had not said, what pictures, what lawyer?" She had not been startled. She had not been confused. She had explanations ready for every single thing I said, and she had them ready inside half a second. A person who is innocent is confused. A person who is rehearsed is calm. I waited until Mia was deep in her purple dinosaur, and I went upstairs and opened Daniel's spare key drawer. I didn't drive to Diane's house Sunday. Not yet. I drove to the family group chat instead, and I scrolled 18 months of pictures. I went through every single one. I screenshotted the ones I needed to a folder on my phone titled Wells Family Chat Archive. When Daniel asked me about it later, I told him the truth. I told him I was looking for a pattern. Here was the pattern. Every photograph that included Mia from the previous 18 months had been posted by Diane or Vivian. 43 pictures. In every single one, Mia was at Diane's house or at Diane's church or on Vivan's lap. In 0 of them was I in the frame. In 9 of them, my absence was the caption. "Mommy is working hard for us tonight. Quality time with grandma while mommy saves lives. Single mom life is hard on you, sis." That last one had 37 likes from people in Daniel's extended family. I scrolled to a post from 6 months ago. Vivan, a photograph of me in scrubs at the entrance to the ER taken from across the parking lot. Caption, just dropping off Mia's lunchbox. She looked like death warmed over. We need to do something. We need to do something. I screenshotted that one twice. I texted Sarah Lynn. "Hey, when you're back from sick leave, can I ask you something weird?" Sarah texted back inside 2 minutes. "Always, what's up?" I said, "Has my sister-in-law Aversion up at the hospital? Tall, brown hair. Lexus. Sarah said, "Oh God, yes. 3 times in the last 6 months I thought she was bringing you food. She never came in. She sat in her car." I said, "Thank you." I sat on the floor of my bedroom with my phone in my hand and I let the carpet hold me up. A child's drawing, a rabbit, a coral cardigan, a stack of photographs of me sleeping. 18 months of architecture. Monday morning, Vivian called me. 8:45, I was making Mia's school lunch. I let Teet ring twice before I picked up. "Hey, sis, bright performative, just checking in on you. How's our girl?" I said. "She's good, we're making lunch." Vivian said, "Listen, Mom wanted me to ask you a favor." I said, "MHM, could you send over your work schedule for the next 2 weeks? Mom's planning something special for Mia before her birthday and she wants to coordinate." I held the butter knife very still over the bread. I said, "What kind of special?" She said, "Oh, just a little transition. Helping her ease into the school year." I said, "Vivan, Mia doesn't start kindergarten until September. That's 8 months away." There was a whole beat where I could hear her drawing breath. She said, "Right, yes. I just meant, birthday season transitions in general." I said, "MHM. She said, "Anyway, just text it over when you can. Love you." She hung up before I could say anything. Wrote the conversation into my note verbatim. 2 times she used the word transition twice. Once as a coincidence, twice as a vocabulary. I texted Daniel, who was on his train back from Boston. "Have you ever heard your sister use the word transition before?" He texted back. "Why?" I texted, just curious. He answered 15 minutes later. "No, why?" I didn't answer. I finished Mia's lunch. I packed beans into her backpack even though she was too old to bring beans to school. I drove her to her preschool. I kissed Heron the forehead. I said, "Be brave today, Mia Bug. I love you so much, so much." She said, "Mommy, you say that every day." I said, "I'll say it every day, baby." I drove home and I made a plan. If you've ever felt that quiet hum of wrong when a family member smiles at your child, the kind you can't quite name, but you don't forget, I want you to do one thing for me. Write it down, date it. The story I'm telling you now started with one whisper in a parking lot. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what happened in the kitchen drawer. Monday at 1:00 in the afternoon, I called Diane. I said, "Hi, Diane. Mia left her purple water bottle at your house, the one with the unicorn. I'm in the neighborhood for an errand. Can I swing by quick?" There was a pause. Diane said, "Oh, honey, I'll just drop it by tomorrow. I'm not actually home right now." I said, "No worries. Where are you?" She said, "Cynthia's. I'll be a few hours." I said, "Have fun. I'll text you about tomorrow." I drove to Diane's cul-de-sac. I parked at the corner where her house wasn't visible. I waited 20 minutes. At 1:23, Diane's Camry pulled out of the driveway with Vivan in the passenger seat. They turned right toward Avon toward Cynthia's house. I drove around the block. I parked in Diane's driveway. I let myself in with Daniel's spare key. The house smelled like cinnamon. The kitchen was sunny. The third drawer from the left was on the inside of a cabinet, just like Mia said. I opened it. There was a calendar inside October on top. 3 months of red X's. The X marks marched in a row toward a single red circle. The circle was on the 3rd Saturday of next month. Inside the circle, in Diane's careful school teacher handwriting, were 2 words, "Transition Day." Underneath the circle in smaller letters was another sentence in the same handwriting, "Our special secret. Don't tell Mommy." I read those words 4 times. Then I took a photograph. Then I read them a 5th time. Beneath the calendar was a manila folder. The tab read MIA documentation. I lifted it out and I sat down at Diane's kitchen table and I opened it. The first page was a photograph of me asleep in my car in the hospital parking lot. The timestamp on the photo metadata said 3:11 a.m. 8 months ago. The photo had been taken through my driver's side window. Someone had stood next to my car and taken it. The second page was a typed page from a Word document single-spaced. The header read incidents. There were 42 of them. Dates, descriptions, fabrications. The third page was a form, a Connecticut probate court guardianship petition with a draft signature already in place. The signature line said Cynthia Hartwell, Esquire. I sat at my mother-in-law's kitchen table, and I did not breathe out for a long time. I read every page of that folder, sitting at my mother-in-law's kitchen table with my phone propped up against a salt shaker recording video of every single page as I turned it. I am a nurse. I document evidence. I do it the way I was trained to do it. The folder contained in order 14 photographs of me dated and time-stamped in places I had been most exhausted in the previous 18 months. The ER parking lot at 3:00 a.m., the Stop and Shop on Park Road with grocery bags, the pediatrician's office in February when Mia had bronchitis, and I had come straight from a night shift. Vivan had been close enough each time to read the lettering on my badge. I had never seen her. A 42-page handwritten journal of incidents, most fabricated. Mia cried for an hour because Mommy was late. Mia said she wasn't sure where she lived. Mia asked Grandma if Grandma could be her real mommy. Some of the incidents had supposed witnesses. Vivian, always Vivan. A typed letter. 2 months old from Cynthia Hartwell. Diane, this is enough to file in probate. Pediatric records will strengthen. Work on Dr. Patel at the next visit. Frame it as we just want to be involved. Petition can go in once we have one professional witness. Cynthia had signed her bar number. I cross-referenced it on my phone. It was real. She was an inactive member in good standing of the Connecticut Bar Association. A draft of a guardianship petition. Standard Connecticut probate court form. Petitioner Diane Wells. Subject minor, Mia Wells Morrison. Reasons cited, parental incapacity due to chronic occupational fatigue and emotional unavailability. Recommended placement, maternal grandmother's home. Recommended visitation for biological parents. Weekends supervised. A USB drive in a small Ziploc bag. I didn't open it on her counter. I dropped it in my purse. I closed the folder. I returned it to the drawer the way I had found it. I lifted the calendar and replaced it carefully. I closed the drawer. I locked the back door. I walked out the front. I locked that too. I sat in my Subaru for 90 seconds with my hands on the steering wheel. Then I called my brother Jack. I said, "Jack, I need you in Connecticut by Friday." He said, "I'll be there tomorrow." I drove home with the speed limit and one hand on the wheel, and I rehearsed the sentences I'd say to my husband when he walked through our front door at 6. Daniel got home Monday at 6. I had Mia eating mac and cheese at the table. I had beans next to her bowl. I had an iPad lying face down on the kitchen counter. I let him kiss our daughter. I let him put his bag down. I waited until Mia asked if she could go watch one episode of Bluey before bath. I said I closed the door to the living room behind her. I picked up the iPad. I flipped it over. I put it in front of Daniel. I said, "Don't say anything for 90 seconds, just look." He scrolled. I watched his face. He hit page 1, the photo in the parking lot. He hit page 2, the journal. He hit page 5, the draft petition. He saw the signature. His face went the color of skim milk. He said, "This can't be real." I said, "Look at the bar number, Daniel." I verified it. It's your Aunt Cynthia, active inactive member. Letterhead matches her old firm. He sat down on a kitchen chair. He held the iPad on his knees. He said, "Mom wouldn't." I said, "She did." He said, "How did you get this?" I said, "I went to the house this afternoon. The folder was in a kitchen drawer, the same one Mia opened on Friday. Daniel didn't speak for a while. Then he said, 'I'm going to call Mom.' I said, 'No, not yet, not before I tell you something.' He looked up. I said, 'Daniel, I love you. You're a kind person. You are also someone who has built a habit of pretending your mother is harmless. I need you to choose right now whether you're with me on this or not. You have 48 hours. I am not going to wait longer than that. Our daughter does not have time for you to be careful.' He looked at me. He nodded. He said, 'I'm with you.' I said, 'Prove it.' Daniel drove to his mother's house Monday night at 8:30. I stayed home with Mia. I gave her a bath. I read her The Snowy Day. I lay next to her until she fell asleep. Daniel came home at 10:45. He sat down on the edge of our bed without taking his shoes off. He didn't speak for a minute. Then he told me what had happened. He had walked into the kitchen. The folder had been on the counter where she had moved it after I left. The calendar had been open on the table. She had been making tea. She had turned around with 2 mugs. He had said, "Mom, what is this?" She had set the mugs down. She had not pretended. She had said, "Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk." She had told him she was just protecting Mia. She had told him I was overwhelmed. She had told him he didn't see it because he loved me. She had told him she was being the kind of mother to Mia she had never had herself. He had said, "Mom, you photographed my wife sleeping in her car. You wrote 42 incidents that didn't happen. You drafted a court petition with Aunt Cynthia." His mother had gone still. She had said, "How do you know about Cynthia?" He had said, "Mom, you're giving me the spare key to our house and to this house tonight." She had cried. She had said his name. She had reached for him. He had stood up. He had asked for the keys. She had given them to him. He had driven home. He told me all this sitting on the bed. I held his hand. I said, "Tomorrow, Jack is coming." Jack Morrison drove up from Hartford Tuesday morning. He's 35, a family law attorney, 2 and taller than me with the same dark hair. He walked into my kitchen at 9:15 with a thermos of black coffee and a leather portfolio. He kissed me on the cheek. He shook Daniel's hand. He sat down at the table. He said, "Show me everything." I showed him the video of the folder, the screenshots from the group chat, Mia's verbatim quote, Sarah Lynn's text confirming Viven's parking lot visits, the bar number cross-reference. Jack listened. He did note interrupt. When I was done, he opened his portfolio and started writing. He said, "Here's the order of operations. 1, we get a letter from your nurse manager confirming your performance evaluations and your work record. I want it on hospital letterhead. 2, we get a character letter from Dr. Patel, Mia's pediatrician, confirming she has met you and observed your parenting. 3, we get a sworn statement from Sarah Lynn about the stalking in the parking lot. 4, we file an ethics complaint with Connecticut Bar against Cynthia Hartwell for conflict of interest and improper representation of a family member petitioner. 5, we prepare a restraining order petition. We hold it. We do not file unless she pushes." I said, "What about the USB?" He said, "We don't use it. Anything she recorded for herself is circumstantial. The folder is what wins this, the folder and the calendar." He looked at me. He said, "Athena, you don't need to fight her. You just need to show her what Shebelt." Loudly. Once I said, "Birthday party." He said, "Yes." The Department of Children and Families called my cell phone Tuesday at 4:15 p.m. The caseworker's voice was professional and careful. She said her name was Ms. Brennan. She said her office had received a report of concern regarding Mia Wells Morrison. She said the report had come in Sunday night. She said she'd like to schedule a home visit. Wednesday afternoon, 2 p.m. was I available? I said, "Of course, Miss Brennan, I'll be home. Mia will be home from preschool by then. My husband Daniel will be present. Thank you for letting me know." She paused. She said, "Most people, ma'am, ask me what the report said." I said, "I am a nurse practitioner, Ms. Brennan. I run a pediatric ER. I already know what the report said. I'd like to make sure I have everything ready to show you Wednesday." She paused longer. She said, "I'll see you Wednesday at 2. I hung up. I walked into the living room where Daniel was sitting on the couch helping Mia with a sticker book. I said, "Your mother called CPS." Daniel went still. The sticker peeled away from the page in his fingers. He said, "I told her last night not to do anything." I said, "Daniel, she doesn't follow instructions. She makes plans." He looked at the floor. I said, "Wednesday at 2:00, a stranger from the state is coming to our house to interview our daughter because your mother decided to make it happen from the kitchen where she lied to your face about a calendar." He looked up at me. He said, "What do I do?" I said, "You stay calm, you make us a casserole, and you let me run my ER." Ms. Brennan arrived Wednesday at 1:59. She was 40-some, gray cardigan, glasses on a beaded cord. I made her coffee. Daniel made small talk. Mia was on the floor of the living room with beans and a coloring book. Ms. Brennan looked at our refrigerator. She looked at the meal calendar on the side. She looked at Thesnac drawer in the kitchen, full of goldfish and apple slices and the protein bars I keep for myself. She looked at Mia's bedroom, the bookshelves, the matching dinosaur pillowcases, the framed photo of the 3 of us at the beach in Rhode Island. She sat down with Mia for 15 minutes alone. I did not eavesdrop. I sat in the kitchen with Daniel and I held my coffee and I did not look at the door. Miss Brennan came out. She sat down across from me. She said, "Your daughter says you make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs." I said. Triceratops mostly. Stegosaurus is hard to flip. Ms. Brennan almost smiled. She said, Mrs. Morrison, the report we received contained specific allegations, photographs, a claim that you had been observed asleep in your car. Can you speak to that? I said. I can do better than that, Miss Brennan. I slid a folder across the table to her. 40 pages, photographs, the journal, the petition, the bar number, cross-reference, Sarah Lynn's statement, the screenshot of Vivian's caption, we need to do something. Ms. Brennan's eyebrows went up. Then her eyebrows went up further. She read for 9 minutes. She closed the folder. She said, Mrs. Morrison, this report will be marked unsubstantiated and I will be noting the source for an internal review. She paused. She said, you did everything right by your daughter. I'm sorry someone wanted you to feel like you didn't. If you're listening to this in your car, in your kitchen, while you fold someone else's laundry, I want you to know something. The quiet ones notice everything. The quiet ones build the proof and the quiet ones win. Subscribe if you've ever been the quiet one. The next part is the birthday party. Thursday at 3:40 in the afternoon, a card arrived in our mailbox. Cream card stock, hand-altered, a gold foil cupcake at the top. You're invited to Mia's 6th birthday. Saturday, 2 p.m., 14 Whitfield Lane. Cake, games, and a very special surprise for our birthday girl. Love, Grandma Diane. Daniel looked at me across the kitchen. He said she mailed it before. I said she mailed it last week. I opened the family group chat Vivian had posted at 8 in the morning Monday, 3 days earlier. Mom has the cutest announcement for Mia. Can't wait to see everyone Saturday. 28 RSVPs in the thread. Family, neighbors, 2 women from Diane's church book club. Cynthia Hartwell, RSVP. Yes, I scrolled to the date. The invitation date matched the day on Diane's calendar. The red-circled day, transition day. I said she didn't cancel the party. Even after Daniel took the key, Daniel said, Mom doesn't believe anything is over until she says it's over. I said, good, we can use that. I picked up my phone and I texted Jack one sentence. She's still throwing the party Saturday. Jack texted back inside 30 seconds. Perfect. Mia walked into the kitchen in her pajamas. She held the corner of the card stock between 2 fingers. She said, Mommy, is this form? I said, yes, baby. She said, are we going? I said, yes, baby, we're going and we're bringing beans. Friday night, kitchen table again. Jack, Daniel, me, 3 coffees, a plate of cheese and crackers nobody ate. Daniel said, we could just not go, block her number, send the police if she shows up. I said, and let her tell 40 people I kept her grandchild from her. No, she built the stage. We're going to use it. Jack said, if we go, we do Thistlian. 3 documents, 3 sentences, no yelling. Then we leave. Daniel rubbed his temples. He said, Mom kept Beans from last weekend. She told me Mia forgot him at her house. I said, Beans was with Mia in her car seat when we drove away Saturday morning. He has been on our couch every night since. Daniel said, Mom told me yesterday she was washing his ears. We all looked at each other. Daniel said she lied to my face about a stuffed rabbit to make a reason for contact. I said she lied to you about everything for 18 months. Daniel, the rabbit is the easiest part to prove. Jack said, Athena, I'll bring the portfolio. I'll sit at table 7 and I won't move until you stand. If she comes for you physically, I'll step in. If she comes for you legally, I'll already be standing. Daniel said, what do I do? I said, you stand next to me. He said, okay. I said, and you don't apologize for anything that isn't yours to apologize for. He said, okay. Jack said, and after we leave, the locks change. Monday morning, I have a guy. I said, 2 locks front and back. Jack said, 3 the basement too. Saturday morning at 10:00, I sat on the floor of Mia's bedroom while she picked out her dress. I had bought her a purple dress with stars on it 3 weeks earlier before any of this had begun. Diane had mailed her a matching mommy and grandma outfit 2 weeks ago, a pink dress with cherries. Mia hadn't worn it. Mia held up the purple one. She said this one. I said, beautiful choice. She dressed herself. She tied her own shoes. She picked Beans up and tucked him under her arm. Then she looked at me. Her face was serious. She said, Mommy, do I have to keep Grandma's secret? I knelt down in front of her. I put my hands on her shoulders. I said, "No, sweetheart, you don't have to keep any secret. Not from Mommy, not ever. Not now and not when you're older. If anyone asks you to keep a secret from Mommy, you tell me right away. Do you understand?" She nodded. I said, "And you are not in trouble for telling me about the calendar. You are the bravest girl I know. I am proud of you forever." She put her arms around my neck. Beans pressed against my cheek. She said, "Can I bring him?" I said, "Beans goes everywhere we go." I stood up. I straightened her hair. I walked her downstairs. Daniel was at the door in a buttoned down. Jack was waiting in his car at the curb. I picked up my own bag. Inside it was the manila folder with the same tabs Diane had used. Different contents. We pulled into Whitfield Lane at 1:15. There were 40 cars on the street. The garage was open. A white vinyl banner hung from the eaves. "Happy 6th birthday, Mia. A new chapter." I read it twice. So that's what she meant by transition. The yard was full. Diane's neighbors of 20 years. Daniel's 3 cousins, 2 women from Diane's brunch group, the ones who always wear matching sun hats, a folding bar of seltzers and white wine on the back patio, a buffet of finger sandwiches with the crusts cut off, a 3-tier cake on a card table, unicorn-themed, the way Mia had once mentioned to Diane that she liked. Diane saw us first, coral cardigan, hair freshly set. She came forward with both arms out, ignored Daniel's stiffness, ignored my polite distance, and went straight for Mia. Knelt down. "Oh, sweetheart, you're here. Grandma missed you so much." Mia held Beans against her chest. She didn't move her face toward Diane. Diane reached for Beans. "Oh, you found him. I was so worried I'd lost him for you." Mia said very clearly, "Mommy found him." Diane's smile flickered, recovered. She straightened up. She looked at me. She said, "Athena, honey, I'm so glad you came." I said, "Of course, Diane. It's Mia's birthday." Vivienne approached in a coral dress that matched her mother's cardigan. She did not make eye contact with me. She hugged Mia. "Mia, let her." Vivian stood up and walked away faster than she should have. Cynthia Hartwell was on the back patio with a glass of white wine, cream blazer, pearls. She turned her head when she saw me. She did not raise her glass. Jack walked into the yard from the side gate. Polo shirt, khakis. He nodded at me once and went to table 7. He set his portfolio on the empty chair next to him. He sat down. Hel looked at his phone. Diane tapped her champagne flute with a butter knife. The yard went quiet. Diane stood at the head of the cake table. She placed a hand on her chest. She smiled at the gathered yard. She said, "Thank you everyone for being here today for Mia's 6th birthday and for what I think is going to be a very special new chapter in our family." She turned and smiled at Mia. Mia stood beside me holding Beans. I had my hand on her shoulder. Diane said, "As many of you know, my son Daniel and his lovely wife Athena have been working so hard, so hard. Athena is on the front lines of medicine. Daniel is climbing his career. They have been pouring everything they have into giving Mia a wonderful life." A small, approving murmur, Diane said. "And after a great deal of thought and a lot of conversation and a lot of love, we have decided as a family that for the upcoming school year, Mia will be spending most of her week with Grandma so her parents can keep doing their important work, and Mia can have the kind-of slow, attentive, present childhood that I think every grandchild deserves." She put her hand over her heart. She looked at me. She said, "Athena, you are giving me such a gift. Truly, and I am so honored to receive it." Vivian behind her raised her glass. "It's such a beautiful arrangement, sis." Cynthia Hartwell raised her glass to family taking care of family. Diane looked at Mia. She smiled. She said into the microphone of her own raised voice the sentence she had said to me at a Sunday brunch 4 years ago. "She's safer here with me. Always will be." The yard waited for me to clap. I did not clap. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. "I want you to understand that I have run codes in my ER where a child's heart stopped on the table and I did not raise my voice then either. The training is the training." I stood up. 40 heads turned. Jack at table 7 opened his portfolio and slid mine across to me. I said, "Diane, before we have cake, I'd like to share 3 documents I think the family deserves to see." Diane's face did not move. Her smile stayed exactly where it had been. I opened the folder. I removed the first tab. I said, Due one is a guardianship petition prepared for the Connecticut probate court. It is dated 3 months ago. The petitioner is Diane Wells. The subject minor is my daughter, Mia Wells Morrison. The supervising attorney listed on this draft is Cynthia Hartwell, Diane's sister, currently an inactive member of the Connecticut Bar, bar number 327781. A glass clink-egged against a table. I did not look up. I removed the second tab. I said document 2 is a journal kept by Diane over 18 months, documenting 42 incidents of alleged neglect, by me none of which occurred. The originals are with the Department of Children and Families, which received an anonymous report against me on Sunday night and closed it as unsubstantiated Wednesday afternoon. The state has now opened a separate review on the reporter. Vivian sat down hard, her chair scraped. I removed the third tab. I said, do a photograph of a calendar I found in this kitchen on Monday afternoon. The calendar shows a red circle on today's date. Inside the red circle in Diane's handwriting are 2 words, transition day. Underneath the circle in the same handwriting is this sentence. I lifted the page. I read aloud slowly the words my 5-year-old daughter had been told to keep secret from me. Our special secret. Don't tell Mommy. 40 people did not move. Diane's face stopped pretending. The pastel softness fell off of it the way a curtain falls when somebody finally yanks the cord. She said, you went through my house. I said, I picked up a water bottle. The folder was on the counter, Diane. Her voice rose. Daniel, are you going to let her? Daniel said, Mom, don't. Diane turned back to me. Her hands had become fists. She said, she's mine more than she's yours. You don't even put her to bed half the nights. I am the only consistent person in that child's life. I said, she is my daughter, Diane, and she will continue to be my daughter. Diane turned to Cynthia. Cynthia, say something, tell them. Cynthia stood up slowly. She set her wine glass down on the patio rail. Her face was the color of paper. She said, Diane, I'm sorry. She turned to me. She said, Athena, I should never have helped my sister draft that petition. I am surrendering my bar license on Monday. I will write to the Connecticut Bar Association myself. I am sorry. She walked out the side gate. Daniel stepped forward and stood next to me. He turned and faced the yard. He said, the locks on our house are being changed Monday. The spare key my mother had to our home has been retrieved, effective today. My mother has no access to my home, my wife, or my daughter. Vivian stood up. Daniel, listen. I just wanted Mia to have family. I did not turn around. I said, Vivian, you photographed me sleeping in my car. You sent the picture to your mother with the caption, we need to do something. We are done. Diane sat down on a folding chair. She covered her face with both hands. She said quietly through her hands, I wasn't raised. I was raised by a stranger. I just wanted Mia to know her family. I paused 2 seconds. I said, you taught her how to lie to her mother. That isn't family. That is the thing that happened to you. Repeating itself through your hands, I turned to my daughter. Mia was standing near the cake. Beans was crushed against her stomach. Her eyes were as big as I have ever seen them. I knelt down in front of her. I put my hands on her shoulders. I said, hi, baby, you want to go home? She nodded once. I said, you want pancakes shaped like dinosaurs? She nodded again, the barest smile. Daniel picked up the gift bags Diane had set out. He carried them out the side gate to our car. Jack walked behind us. Diane was still in the folding chair with her hands over her face. Vivan was crying into a napkin. The neighbors were silent. The cake sat uncut on the table. We walked through the side gate. We did not run. We walked at the pace of a 5-year-old. I buckled Mia into her car seat. I gave her beans. I shut the door. Diane was on the porch by the time I turned around. Her cardigan was crooked. She called out, Daniel, please. Daniel did not turn around. He got in the passenger seat. He closed the door. I walked around to the driver's side. I put my hand on the door handle. I half turned and I spoke just loudly enough for the front row guests to hear. I said, she's coming home with me tonight. And every night after I got in, I closed the door. I drove. Mia fell asleep in her car seat 10 minutes from Whitfield Lane. Beans was tucked under her chin. Daniel watched her in the rearview mirror for a long time. He said, I'm sorry. I said, I know. He said, "How long do you think she?" I said, "Long, Daniel. I don't want talk out the months tonight." He said, "What now?" I said restraining order Monday, locks Tuesday, therapist for Mia Wednesday, couples counseling for us starting Thursday, and we never ever have another conversation about my mothering where mom means well is a sentence you say to me. He said, "Okay." He looked out the window. He said, "I should have seen it." I said, "She has been your mother your whole life, Daniel. She had a 30-year head start on me. The only thing you have to do now is right going forward." We pulled into our driveway. Daniel got out. He came around to my side. He opened my door. I sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel. He said, "Stay there, I've got her." He unbuckled Mia. He carried her inside, beans clutched in one of her small fists. I watched them go through the front door. I sat in the driveway one more minute. I put my hand on the steering wheel at 10 and 2, the way I had 8 days earlier in a parking lot at 7:42 in the morning, and my daughter had whispered 7 words in my ear, and I had felt my hands go cold. 8 days. I let myself feel one quick wave of tired. I let it pass. Then I got out of the car and I walked into my own house where my husband was carrying our daughter up the stairs to her own bedroom, and I closed the front door behind me and I locked it. 2 months later, the restraining order was active. 12 months, no contact with Mia, no contact at her school, no appearance within 500 FT of our home. Cynthia Hartwell voluntarily surrendered her Connecticut bar license on the second Monday after the party. The Bar Association published her name in their quarterly newsletter under voluntary disbarments. Vivian moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, 6 weeks after the party. She blocked Daniel on her phone before she left, which felt to me like a small mercy he didn't have to earn. Diane sent 4 letters, 3 to me, 1 to Daniel. I returned them unopened. The 5th came certified. I returned that one, too. Daniel is in individual therapy. We started couples therapy 3 weeks after the party. He has not seen his mother since. The grief he carries is real. He carries it on his own time in his own corner of our marriage, and he does not lay it down at my feet. Mia is in play therapy 6 sessions in. She started kindergarten last week. She drew a family picture and pinned it on the fridge. 4 figures. Mommy, Daddy, Mia, Beans. I'm a quiet woman. I always have been. I used to think that was a weakness, that the loud people would always have more weight. I learned something in those 8 days. The loud people forget that the quiet ones are watching. They forget that we write things down. And when we finally speak, we don't need to raise our voices. We just need to read. That's my story. If a quiet voice has been telling you something about someone close, write it down today. If this reminded you of someone, share it with her. Thank you for being here.